It's Wizards versus Lesbians, a podcast for your ears. Hello and welcome to Wizards versus Lesbians. My name is Isaac.
I'm Alexis.
And we have a guest. Guest, would you please introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Arkady Martine.
We are so excited to have you with us. And you have brought us a book today, a book called... Did I say that with stank on it?
You kind of did.
It's not that weird of a book, as books go. I could have done weirder.
Unwarranted stank. Unwarranted. It's good. It's just trying to do something impossible. Also, there's some audio strangeness in this one. My apologies. It's true. You've brought us a very normal book that has come from unusual circumstances. The book is called Karla'S Choice by Nick Harkaway. Would you tell us what happens in this book in a spoiler-free sort of a way?
So, this is a book written by Nick Harkaway, who happens to, under his wallet name, be the son of the man who went by the name Jean Le Carré. So it is a Le Carré novel about George Smiley, all sanctioned and everything. It was written after Le Carré passed away, and his son has taken up the mantle of writing in that universe. So it's set between The Spy Who Came In From the Cold and Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. And it is about how George Smiley learned some unpleasant things about his nemesis, Karla.
That absolutely sums it up. Alexis was a Le Carré fan going into this recording. I had not read a single one of his books. I've read 3.5 of his books now, in addition to this one. Thank you so much for giving me a reason to do so. I enjoyed myself thoroughly.
I loved having the excuse to reread, so...
It was a pure pleasure, and it certainly made this book much more interesting. So we will dispense with our standard questions. Are there wizards in this book? Yes. Yes, there are. George Smiley is a wizard. Control is absolutely
wizard, as is Karla.
Yes, Karla is a wizard. I incidentally, having watched a few clips from the BBC adaptation of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy and Smiley's People on YouTube, Karla's just Patrick Stewart to me now.
That's fair.
I'm just picturing bearded, silent Patrick Stewart every time that Karla is brought up. There are, however, no lesbians.
There is! Connie is a lesbian! Connie is a lesbian. Textually.
Yes.
Connie is textually a lesbian, and Irene is metaphorically a lesbian.
Oh, excellent. I will absolutely ask you more questions about that when we get to the main body of the podcast.
I mean, I know like half of her plot is like about being straight, but she fulfills a narrative role. Anyway.
It is a fine tradition of this podcast to have somebody, especially a guest, argue that somebody should actually be narratively a lesbian. So this is great.
Also, I have to ask you guys, are spies always wizards?
I don't know if every spy is a wizard. I think
Le Carré spies certainly are.
The competent Le Carré spies are wizards. Like Smiley and Control are wizards. I'm not sure that Peter Gilliam is a wizard, though.
What about Bill Hayden?
Oh yes, absolutely. Now, one of our primary wizard criteria is that they extend control over others by strategically withholding information.
Oh, good God! Yeah. What spy who is any good at their job isn't then? Also, what character have I ever written that is not?
Well, this is why we covered your books very early.
Yes, we've covered your books on this podcast. But yes, I think that any spy worth his salt is a wizard by the admittedly loose standards of Wizards versus Lesbians, who will admit almost anybody into the wizarding club if they have a beard or they keep secrets. So, but yes, Connie, thank goodness for Connie, is revealed in Smiley's People to have a poor girl who is taking care of her. So To continue with the traditional questions, why should you read this book specifically? And I'll start with Arkady, move to Alexis, and then myself.
Well, it is a very elegant little spy novel all in of itself. Even if you have never read any Le Carré, even if you've never read any real spy novels and you just think it might be fun. It has a nice little clockwork plot. It has some absolutely lovely internal recriminations for multiple characters, which are my favorite kind of recrimination. And it evokes the milieu of the late 60s, early 70s Cold War in exquisite detail. Then there's the fun part, which is it's written by Nick Harkaway, and half of it is about fathers and sons.
We generally adhere to the author is dead rule on this podcast, wherein we try not to speculate about the people behind the text.
But sometimes you have to.
And because Nick has kindly given us a lovely and very interesting introduction, which thus counts as the metatext of the novel, where I think that he's fair game based on what he says about himself and his relationship to the Le Carré books in that. So
generally the paratextual materials are fair game, so...
Yeah, fair.
There's definitely fertile speculation available to us. Alexis?
I would agree that it's a well put together spy novel. I think it's actually more accessible than Le Carré's novels. I think if you haven't read a spy novel before, you might enjoy this one more than you would enjoy like Tinker Tailor or certainly The Looking Glass War.
That may be true, and I've reread them so many times that they're old friends, so it's hard to tell anymore.
Yeah, I really had to summon up my memory of the first time I read them. So, having
read The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, half of The Looking Glass were Tinker Tailor and Smiley's People, and then this. The contrast is very fresh in my head.
Yes,
I think that I would have enjoyed this book more had I not read those books immediately before.
That is absolutely true, but I'm saving that for why you shouldn't read the book.
Yes,
but yes, in and of itself, it's Nick Harkaway is a good writer, and is no stranger to le mot juste. There are some really beautiful, punchy phrases in here. It is smoothly and competently written. The plot flows, and yeah, it's an adventure.
Honestly, if it weren't using the names of the characters from, the Smiley novels, I think I would have enjoyed this one a lot more.
He's also just taken on an impossible task
for
himself.
It is.
Which, one has to keep that in mind. But having said that, why shouldn't you read this book? Same order.
You shouldn't read this book if you are primarily listening to this podcast because you like things with magic in them. This is a book where the magic is entirely metaphor, and Nick Harkaway's other stuff is a lot more speculative than this book is. So if you are like a Nick Harkaway reader, I would stick with Nick Harkaway does Nick Harkaway. I think also that if you are, and I'm sure you both will have more to say about this, if you are a really fanatical Le Carré person, this may not be the thing for you. However, I am a fairly fanatical Le Carré person, and I really enjoyed it. So,
all right, Alexis.
So I don't know if I'd call myself a fanatical Le Carré person, but I've not read every single one of his novels.
Oh, neither have I.
But I've read. I've read all of the Smiley novels and a couple of his post-Cold War ones, and also his autobiography. And I'm on the other side of this one. I thought that it did. If it had used different names, I would have enjoyed this quite a bit. But it really, everybody monologues, and nobody in Le Carré novels monologue. And especially the interior monologues, which I can understand why you would enjoy, but they're so it felt very off. It felt like I was reading fan fiction by somebody who's a very good writer, but who is basing it more off the fanon than the source material. Possibly because in this case, the author has grown up, among other things, has seen all of the adaptations, which I have not. But also, and also has just grown up with these characters being part of his life. But, based on just the texts, I didn't feel like it did a very good job of capturing any of the characters, which also meant, though, the characters who aren't Le Carré characters, like Erin and Susanna, are actually, I think, end up being much more interesting and compelling characters. Oh, actually, I will add to the reasons why you should read this book is it has more women than your average Le Carré book, and they're all interesting characters, the women. So,
yeah, I think that I would agree. I think that the thing that I liked the most about the Le Carré novels is largely absent from this book. I suppose I should say there are multiple things that I really like about the Le Carré books that are absent from this book. One of which is the political perspective. This book has a very distinct political perspective, I think, and one of which is the gnawing abyss of despair and terror at the heart of all of the Le Carré novels that I read, which is strangely absent from this one.
Trust me, the post-Cold War ones are even worse.
I believe it.
You should read A Most Wanted Man.
And if those two things, if the political cynicism combined with the existential dread aren't what you're into, then this is fine, I think.
I really disagree with you. That's fascinating. So, I mean, I agree that the flavor of dialogue is different. And I think, personally, having gone back fairly immediately to read Tinker Tailor after reading this back a couple months ago, part of it is a recognition of an inability to do the imitation correctly and therefore choosing to not try.
Yes, and I think that was absolutely the correct choice.
Because there's nothing worse than failing at that.
And Le Carré is so good at this incredibly efficient spare prose and dialogue.
Yes, it's beautiful. I can't do it either. I admire it very much, and it is next to impossible to pull off and not either sound deliberately gnomic or completely incomprehensible.
Right. Or just boring.
Yes, both. Both are boring. And Le Carré is not boring.
Never.
But I found, well, maybe not the political point of view, but absolutely the sense of despair woven all the way through this one. Really quite deeply. And if it perhaps was a more, intensely colored despair. A despair with more heights and depths, which goes with having the more vivid and more easily explicated dialogue. But the despair itself, the inevitable futileness of participating in spy work, and the necessity to do it anyway, or at least that you find yourself doing it anyway, no matter what you think, that for me is at the heart of Le Carré, I feel like is all the way through this.
I guess it's the bleakness that's not there.
I'm absolutely willing to accept that it may be, in fact, the monotone emotional deadness of the original text that I was missing.
Fair enough.
And that, in fact, what I was responding to here with where did this come from was, in fact, as you say, tone color.
Mm-hmm. Of which it is much wider, the tone color.
I think a specific aspect of the tone I missed is the mundane terror that runs through all the spy crouch sections of Le Carré's novels, where even seasoned spies are having near panic attacks just walking down the streets in a town that isn't theirs, and sometimes at home.
But I think that part of that is that, I think that part of the sort of bleakness that you get in the Le Carré novel is that everyone is so incredibly emotionally constipated that they're just incapable of emoting. And he does this very well. And again, I think it was the right choice for Harkaway not to try to mimic this. But because his characters are capable of expressing their emotions through dialogue or at least interior monologue, that ends up draining some of the bleakness out of it, because the sort of fundamental inability to cross this divide, it's like there's this alienation that isn't present as much in this one, I think.
Let's take this conversation
to the spoiler zone.
To the spoiler zone.
Okay, then content warnings.
With a brief stop at content warnings, yes. Content warnings. Well, murder.
Of which there is plenty.
Indeed. And gaslighting.
Of which there is plenty.
Yes. Various spycraft. And there's not a whole lot of other explicitly upsetting content in this one beyond,
The general emotional tone.
Exactly. And I think that might be it. Spoiler zone. So Alexis and I were talking prior to this recording, and I was wondering if they and I had zeroed in on the same line in Nick Harkaway's introduction, which was that as a small child, Nick would read himself to sleep with the Le Carré novels, that these were bedtime stories for Nick, which really, which stuck with me for a number of reasons. But I think my sort of there's a lot in this book which strikes me as I don't know, the word may not be shying away from some of the genuine brutality and misery of the period. There are elisions which I think are in part just a concession to modern publishing standards and the norms of the era. There's a moment where Esterhazy is confronting a couple of street thugs, and they call somebody an Indian when that would be 5,000% a slur under the circumstance. And there are various other things like this where it feels like we are shying away in various ways from the real nastiness that might have occurred in time. And I was tempted to think, well, it makes sense that the rougher edges have been sanded off of a lot of these characters and a lot of these situations just by it having been one's comfort reading as a small child. But that's sort of a kind of a facile, armchair psychologist reading. But there were some parts of it that did seem gentle enough that it kept raising that in my head. There was a point at which Smiley thinks to himself, if only the West and the Soviets could have just, spent some time talking to each other at the end of the war, that they wouldn't have misinterpreted containment as engagement, or words to that effect. And I'm like, no, George, not even in his most optimistic, would never.
But I will admit, I thought that George really should be more drunk to think that.
Yeah.
Right.
Sentiment.
What I think you're interpreting as softening, I am interpreting as a deep authorial fondness for the characters, which is a little different. And for me, the intensity of the familiarity that must exist for anyone who has read themselves to sleep from the age of tiny with Tinker Tailor, etc., and who also knows that one's own father creates these people and seems to have had a wonderful relationship with his father. I don't want to speculate, but to all visible intents and purposes, these are friends. And friends are interesting. Yes. And writing the inside of the heads of friends, you want to give them all of the space that you know they have. It's generous to the characters. And I think I can forgive that a little bit, because it was also well done. Though I can go with you guys on the kind of almost out of character internality. The actions in the world don't read unlike these people to me.
No, the way they talk does. They share more, I think. They explain more.
Oh my god, that's modern editing standards. No one will let you get away with being obscure anymore.
I believe it, but, it's nonetheless annoying. I think that makes a lot of sense, that the way they act. I mean, there is some ways that everything is sort of ramped up a little bit. I mean, Esterhazy getting into a fist fight in front of the fake passport guy feels very, that feels very like it would have been cut even from the spy who came in from the cold for being a little too gonzo.
We have a car chase behind the Iron Curtain, and fleeing from the Hungarian police and that kind of stuff, which is all a little bit overt for the source material, but not for the adaptations. Arkady points out, but with me talking over her, so this instead. But I don't begrudge him that. I think again that is just part of what is expected from this kind of book in this day and age, and it doesn't detract. It's like, as you were saying, Arkady, we're not attempting to do a sort of a slavish recreation of Le Carré here. And even if we were, the question that would come up is, which Le Carré are we meant to be imitating here? Because the tone of The Spy Who Came In From the Cold and the tone of Tinker Tailor and Spiteless People are completely different. There's at some point in the intervening years, Le Carré worked out a great deal of his internalized misogyny, for example. Yes. And this book likes women more than either of those. And as we said before, that's not a bad thing.
This is a book written by a man who was raised by a man who had gotten over his internalized misogyny.
I apologize for being the first one to say internalized misogyny, which, although incorrect, does suggest some hitherto unexplored transmask Le Carré headcanons. Right.
And I mean, I will note that this felt very jarring to me reading, but I don't think it was a bad artistic decision, is actually giving Anne, of all people, interiority.
Yeah. It didn't make me dislike her any less. I know one is supposed to get over disliking Anne, but I cannot.
I think it actually made me dislike her slightly more. I think I liked her better when she didn't have interiority. I thought she's more interesting. And the thing is, when she doesn't have interiority, then you can understand that some of her bad behavior is clearly like George projecting his own issues onto her and her falling short. But once you actually get to see inside her, you go, oh no.
I actually think that giving Anne interiority makes George more fallible and in some ways more interesting.
Yes. George's relationship with Anne in the original books is essentially defined by a combination of loneliness and professional jealousy. And there's no sense beyond Anne's great beauty that George has ever enjoyed her as a human being.
I think there's one scene in The Honorable Schoolboy where he's, which is the Karla trilogy one that you haven't read yet, where he's flashing back to a scene where she's trying to win him, where he's trying to win her over, and she's just being awful to him. And that to me, that just sort of gave me the impression that he must enjoy being treated that way on some level.
Most people are frightened of him or ignore him.
Yes.
Anne does neither.
She sees him and she's really awful to him, and I also just think that to some degree he uses Anne as the embodiment of his self-loathing.
Yes. She's a tulpa of every that he's created out of every instance in which he feels inadequate.
Not what he most wants, but what he most desires to want.
Yes.
And I think that you were right in saying that because one of the things that sort of animates all of these characters in Le Carré's telling is self-loathing. I think that most of our point of view characters experience a certain degree of self-loathing.
The ones who are competent all experience self-loathing.
Yes, the ones who are not are perfectly serene.
Yes, it's very Dunning-Kruger, that universe. But the idea that, and one feels along with the self-loathing of the characters, that the narrative voice does not disagree with their assessment of themselves. Whereas, as you say in this one, the narrative voice has sympathy for the characters, and the characters are encouraged to have sympathy for themselves. And in some cases, this changes them not at all. In some cases, this changes them a little bit. Anne seems to be completely transformed. And I think that, I don't know if the problem is that in a lot of cases, the mystery or the vacuum that we got from Le Carré has been replaced with something which is a little commonplace even. The sort of Anne reaching out to her endless parade of lovers because George is married to his job. It's like, it's the choice, it is the default choice under these circumstances. But
the most canonical choice. Like, it's the one that allows Anne to have interiority without changing anything.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously Anne would have her parade of lovers if George fails to accompany her to Vienna.
But from a craft point of view,
if I was given this horrific challenge, I'm both better and worse off than Harkaway is there, because A, I was not the child of Le Carré, and B, I was not the child of Le Carré. But you have to make some choices, especially with the time period he's chosen. He's chosen a nicely open slot in between events. He's got a good 5 to 7 years to work with between The Spy Came In From the Cold and Tinker Tailor. But he has to build something that changes nothing on either side of what he's built, which is a really difficult trick.
Mm.
Right. Among other things, you have to create suspense when you know that most of these named characters are still going to be alive in...
Yeah, and you know what they're going to be like internally. So how do you change things while changing nothing? And I mean, Anne is an obvious example because she doesn't get that much interiority, honestly. What is it, like 2 scenes? Maybe 1 scene? What can you do with giving Anne interiority that serves the book but changes nothing about Anne? You don't do anything unexpected. I mean, personally, I think, again, thinking purely from a craft perspective, as if this was a puzzle, I think I wouldn't have given Anne interiority at all. But there's a reason to do it, and it has to do with the general project of allowing Le Carré's female characters to take up more narrative weight.
Yeah.
And that's a choice that I think is a noble one to have made. But given the constraints, I don't quite know what else he could have done with Anne.
Well, he could have continued to do what he does at one point, which is to put her on the other end of a bad phone connection so that Smiley can't actually hear what she's saying, thus preventing him from having to write her dialogue.
That's getting out of the box. That's freeing yourself from the trap.
Yes.
Spring it without changing it.
And I think that part of the reason to, aside from just giving more narrative weight to all of Le Carré's female characters, I do think that some of this is an attempt to make Anne less of a misogynist caricature. I think she kind of works better as one in the sense that because you're only ever seeing her from these somewhat misogynist men's perspectives, it works better when you don't know what her actual deal is. But again, I agree with you that it was a noble goal.
Yeah. I think I would have just opted not to try, personally. But that's because I really dislike Anne. And always have.
Well, and I will say, so again, I thought that most of the new characters, and I was thinking about this previously as I like the new characters better because I'm not comparing them to their, Le Carré selves, but I think it's also, some of what you're saying, which is that he's allowed to do Harkaway is allowed to do things with the new characters that he can't do with all of the set ones. And so you get you get all these really interesting things, like, the women who helped Susanna when she was first a refugee and are now like sort of stepping in to help her again.
I would read several books about those people.
I know, right? If Harkaway wants to write books set in the same thing, but just like focusing on all of the women in Karla'S Choice, I would gobble that up.
If he wants to write Susanna books, I would buy many Susanna books.
I would buy many Susanna books. Or, whatever Erin wants to do next would also be interesting. But also, Connie's little group of brilliant women who are, too immigrant and too Jewish.
The bad aunts.
Mm-hmm. And that, and even just like the random, probably butch lesbian police officer. They're all actually really great characters. And again, in some ways I feel like it was a missed opportunity. I think it could have been less. This is actually the same problem that The Honorable Schoolboy has, is that it doesn't need to be a Smiley novel.
That's true. It doesn't need to be a Smiley novel.
But it does in order to be published. So
yes, it's clearly a book written as the middle book of a 3-book contract. Don't do 3-book contracts. 2-book contracts are easier to handle.
Yes. No, I would say that's correct. And it doesn't mean that we have to completely forego, characters in the Smiley universe. I think that the less consequential and less complicated characters from the Smiley universe that we get seem more familiar as a general matter. I think he's nailed Esterhazy, because Esterhazy can be whatever Esterhazy needs to be.
Esterhazy is a perfectly reflective mirror.
Exactly, and a bit of a clown. And I think Harkaway is good at writing clowns.
Yes,
based on his other work, I would agree.
Comedy.
Yes, he has a really witty sense of narrative.
He's a little bit more, his sense of humor is a little less dry and a little bit more show-offy than his dad's, but he pulls it off really well. There's definitely parts where I was like, oh, that's a good line.
Yeah.
I would say almost to the point of slapstick occasionally, like our original turncoat who
Miki
defects because he wants to be in a movie with Peter Sellers. I was like,
that's so, yeah.
Still being in a Le Carré mindset, I was like, surely this is ridiculous, and this guy's a double agent. This can't be the story. And
that one was the only moment that, to me, felt like I was not in a Le Carré novel, but instead was in a Slow Horses novel. Because that is so a thing that would happen to River Cartwright. Not to jump series into Spoilerville. I don't know if you guys have read those.
No, I haven't read them. So.
I totally recommend them, actually. They're completely different. They are Mick Herron's Slow Horses novels. They made them into an Apple series, which is also good, but irrelevant. The books are what you should go get. They are spy novels set in mid-aughts to sort of mid-2010s London. So very, very post 9/11, post the Brits having any sort of geopolitical power for real. And everyone in there is an absolute failure except when they're not. And that's the point. That's the concept. They are much more broadly written, but equally bleak to Le Carré. I love them very much. I think you guys would like them.
That's a pretty good pitch. I will check them out.
Absolutely. And I think that may be, one of the keys to understanding the tonal differences between Harkaway and Le Carré here is that, Harkaway is not burdened with the ghost of empire in the same way that Le Carré is, even when writing about the same time period.
There's a difference between living it and growing up mostly after it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, there is not the sort of the actual bone deep, recognition that things have gone south and aren't going to get better, because the period in which Harkaway grew up was actually pretty good. Mm-hmm. At least from a young person's growing up perspective. But yes, no, I found the sort of this agent alights on English soil, and even though it's as impoverished and dirty in some ways as the place that he has come from, the sheer light of freedom in the eyes of the street kids is enough to change his mind and give him a religious experience. Yeah, that was played straight. I don't know what to tell you. But that's not that. I don't think that's a perspective that Le Carré could have brought to the table. But it doesn't feel out of place in this book. I appreciate. Speaking of sort of doing well with side characters, I missed Connie's madness.
Yes, that was Connie. It's funny. The women are, I think, the project of like making the women less problematic. Unfortunately, just both Anne and Connie makes them much less interesting as well.
I think that he there is the Connie soliloquy in many Le Carré books.
Connie is the character who usually monologues, and she didn't get a proper soliloquy here.
Well, she got her speech about Hungary in this one.
Yeah, but it just didn't ramble enough.
Being like as much Hungarian as I am anything else, I felt patriotically stirred.
Hi. As a half Hungarian person, yeah.
Oh, hey.
I mean, like, as much as I am anything else. It's been generations.
Exactly.
And it's the language I don't have at all. But, there's a certain amount of,
why
hey,
would
cool.
you? My God.
I know, it's dreadful. I spent like one day in Budapest this spring and was again horrified by my inability to even vaguely comprehend the language of half my ancestors.
I'm gonna sit here in front of as if I know any of the other languages of my ancestors.
I have some Russian. That's it. And it's bad. So,
I mean, I studied Mandarin, so that's none of my ancestors.
I think we probably have a very similar personal genetic makeup.
Yeah, New York and Ohio Jews came to the U.S. in the early 1900s, right?
Yeah, New York, New Jersey Jews and a bunch of Hungarians also.
Yeah. The Hungarian side on mine ended up in Ohio for complicated reasons involving like asphalt and Detroit. Long story.
I see. Mine ended up in New England because a guy left with all of his village's money and then just kept it and emigrated.
So you do.
When he was supposed to send it back. But, shenanigans. I may or may not edit all of that out.
Yeah, go ahead if you want.
And that concludes the Hungarian nonsense portion of the podcast. Where were we before I started talking about
Hungarians and Connie?
Oh yeah, Connie. I'm totally willing to accept that Connie got a lot stranger over the years. And
she's pretty. I vaguely recall. I should have reread The Honorable Schoolboy actually, because I vaguely recall that she's still kind of weird in that one too.
But I did miss. I mean, the picture of her that Le Carré paints and again, we're going to have to bring up autism since we're talking about spies. And Le Carré novels feel, if not clinically, then autistic in a mood sense, because everybody is so astonishingly emotionally constipated at all times. But the picture of Connie as a sort of a little girl who never grew up and is also just massively brilliant was jettisoned here. But these are prices that one must pay, I suppose. I didn't have any. I wasn't going anywhere.
No. Now I'm interested in something which I'm sure is a longer conversation you've been having about spies and autism. As someone who is neurodivergent but not autistic, I'm fascinated by this angle.
Well, we are both autistic and thus tend to
see it wherever we look. As one of the
strongly identify characters and themes as autistic very easily.
I believe the last time that it came up was a discussion of Stephen Maturin.
Yes, that's right. That was why we were talking about
there.
spies and autism, is in the context of Stephen Maturin.
Yes. As like, I'm an ADHD person. And for me, one of the ways you can get in trouble as a spy is in ADHD failure mode. Everything is related to everything else. Oh, look, all of the connections are there. That problem.
I mean, the other way, I read these things as an ADHD person and go, I would not be able to keep my mouth shut.
Yeah.
Just eventually. Also, like, the amount of focus. I mean, the way that part of what makes, like, Le Carré novels read to me as almost science fiction-y is just the degree of concentration and memory that Smiley can bring to bear seems almost superhuman to me. And I know that there are actually people who can do this, but just like the way that he can sit absolutely still, which actually, I actually learned from when I was TAing, Chinese history. I actually borrowed this technique of just sitting there and polishing my glasses, like George Smiley, to see if it would make the students speak up, and it did.
Mm-hmm. It works. The willingness to sit with distress, which is horrible. Like, I don't recommend it. It's awful. Don't do it.
But to sit while somebody else is melting down.
Does create other people who are absolutely more willing to end the distress than you are, if you can sit through it, which is a spycraft skill.
Yes. No, I've found this working to my advantage in various jobs that I've had, is if you just sit there and stare at them when they've told you to do something unreasonable, they will eventually figure out a way to take it back. But
how much of this podcast are you going to delete, Isaac?
Probably very little. The editing process is more of an art than a science. I will give you my my take on the autism and spies connection, which is essentially that the love of acquiring every little bit of detail about a cast of characters and filing them all away in your brain. A lot of fandom behavior, honestly, along with a sort of a lifelong habit, both of hypervigilance to avoid harm, to reading people in order to make sure that you're not about to be targeted in one way or another, and mirroring, and an attenuation of what you might call the sort of natural, in quotes, hearth loyalty to family and country, which comes from that sort of needing to work to create connections with other human beings, and the sort of, Asperger's-y ability to store and regurgitate and process information makes for good spy candidates. I think it's one of the one of the reasons that these characters continue to come up in stories like this, and also just sort of in real life, particularly when you get into the overlap with cryptography and Bletchley Park and the touring of it all, is how we get to this place.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I mean, I could do the same reading for ADHD, but the two are more related than those of us with one or
Absolutely.
The other tend to.
Connie definitely strikes me as somebody with ADHD. And she's doing that pattern recognition, like free association jumping, and that's part of what makes her both brilliant and also means that she really needs somebody like Smiley to, like, turn what she's saying into a coherent, useful set of facts.
Very much so. I have, in a very small way, in an actual real life job, I have had sort of been a Connie, and it is like that. And you really do need someone who can interpret what the shit you're doing.
The dream to have the whisperer for your particular neurodivergence, and they're paid to do it.
And you're paid too.
And now it's time to reveal the secret lesbian.
So let's talk about Erin.
Yes, that's exactly what I was about to say. So lay out her lesbianism for us.
It's all narrative. And because she is explicitly tagged as a wife and a mother, and therefore is, at least at one point in her life, extremely heterosexual, or behaved in a heterosexual fashion, briefly.
Sure.
But her function in the story Okay, that's not quite right. Her location in the story. What she is doing at the time where the story and her intersect. She is functionally a seditious professor of poetry at a university in Budapest. She is functioning as, she has no other real connections, or if she does, they have been cut off or highly managed by her. She is functioning as a single woman with oracular power, which to me is absolutely a lesbian, narratively.
Can you say more about that? This is interesting.
Probably.
Yes, I want to add oracular to our list of lesbian traits.
Yeah. So she has access to secret knowledge, both in the sense that she has access to pieces of information which the other characters need, and angles of leverage which the other characters need. But she also has access to artistic authority, which is explicitly linked to revolution. And this is what gave her both the secret information and the excessive leverage. Those things, to me, narratively mark her in the slot that I keep in my head that says, like, queer women. It's not maybe explicitly lesbian, it's just extremely queer women.
She definitely does kind of have queer vibes.
Yeah. And also, in our particular expertise, she is also the person whose life is being destroyed by a wizard, who didn't even pause to consider the possibility that she might not want her life to be destroyed, or that she might want to say in the matter in any sense.
The methodology of the destruction, whatever, you know?
Yeah. This is where the mordancy of this book comes through, and I agree that this isn't exactly an optimistic or a, rah-rah jingoistic book. It's because as far as I can tell, there is no good reason at any point why anybody is doing any of this. Control and Smiley had no way of knowing that Karla was attached to it, or even that Karla was as big a deal as he was at the beginning of this project. They simply went forward with it, knowing that they would be destroying at least a few lives, at the minimum a couple of lives, and not more, to sort of test their arm as a cast, as a gambit. In a very sort of wizard-like way. And
that is a way where it really does capture the spirit of the original Le Carré books, I have to say.
Yes.
The end, I thought that the end...
The end was so perfect. Like
the end was much better than the beginning in terms of that feel. And just in general, like...
Though I do want to say, like, the very, very first opening scene with the kid in the bar, if you guys remember that's also incredibly lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that
was
not only incredibly lovely, but really captured the way that Le Carré liked to begin his novels. So yeah, top notch. But yes, no, they take her from her position of relative power and security and wipe that all out, and do not at any point stop to consider the consequences of their actions. Nor does the narrative stop to consider what's going to happen to her next at any point.
Which is also very Le Carré.
Yeah.
Yes. And
Le Carré moves people all over the place and then doesn't pick them up again, which is very spy work during the Cold War.
Right. And then occasionally you just get this odd mention of, oh yes, we gave a few of the agents that we could afford to burn. And you're like, oh, I wonder if any of these were, the people I was reading about in the last novel.
Probably.
Yes.
Right.
It was an act of extreme charity on his part to give the older Russian lady who is at the heart of Smiley's people her happy ending. It stood out even more based on the rarity of it, that she got to live an okay life.
Well, she's in a safe house being watched. It doesn't go past that. So who knows if she gets to live an okay life. She gets a couple months longer of being happy than your average bit player in these
Some
novels.
mention is made of her future, and she's got like a nice guy who comes and visits and talks to her occasionally.
The story opens outward for her as opposed to closing up like a clamshell.
Oh, yes. That's very nice.
So let's actually talk about
the theme.
Oh,
Parents and so we've got Susanna, and she's got like her surrogate mother and her surrogate father figures. This is why Erin was making me think of this. And then, of course, we have the rivalry between, Smiley's two sons. The one who is an actual Le Carré character and lives, and the one who isn't and dies. I think there's another part of why you thought this was an interesting book to discuss, is that this is, this is a book about a father.
I am fascinated by the project of picking up the work of your beloved parent and how successful or unsuccessful that can be. I think it's really interesting. I think it's... and Harkaway actually name checks the other person who's kind of done it in the current speculative publishing field, Joe Hill, who made a very deliberate choice to not identify himself as the son of Stephen King until he was a success on his own merits, a choice which I admire enormously. But Harkaway knows what he's doing. He tells you what he's doing in the opening. He tells you what he's doing in the epigraphs, which is just like, geez, dude, I kind of want to buy him a drink for that. Very genuinely, that was my reaction to opening the book and reading those two epigraphs and being like, well, shit, okay. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt because that was really, really fuck you, watch me about it. Yes. And I kind of love that. But I think in attempting the project of picking up your beloved parents' finest work and trying to do it yourself, you have to, or you inevitably find yourself writing a book about people's relationships with their parents or the idea of legacy.
I mean, I think that you do that if you want to still be present as an individual inside this book, and not be... I mean, because when I think in the speculative fiction world of children who carry on their parents' legacies, it feels to me like children who are cursed. When I think of like Christopher Tolkien or Frank Herbert's son, I'm like, oh, you had no chance from the beginning. I'm so sorry.
You should have written spy novels, guys.
I think spy novels are actually really hard to write.
Well, yes. I mean, that may have gone wrong for other reasons, but it could have been more generative.
Yes, that's true.
But I think that if you are going to, attempt to stand on your own 2 feet against the current and be like, I am going to do this to test my arm. I'm going to do this to attempt, perhaps in some way, to resolve any of the issues that I still hold from being the son of a famous novelist, or the child of a famous novelist, doesn't matter. And also, maybe somebody will make a movie out of this one, and I can buy another house.
Yeah, I mean, nothing wrong with that.
But part of what makes this so interesting to me is that, like, Le Carré's novels are also so much about his own weird, awful, absent father.
Uh-huh.
Like, he's the son of a con man.
Yeah.
And so, so his father just, like, keeps showing up again and again and again in all of his novels, and, always in an awful way. And, like, there's always this sort of, void where people are longing for a parental figure, and like Smiley, for example, just isn't able to be that to them, or whatever. And so the fact that this one is set up where suddenly Smiley kind of is a successful father figure,
well,
and
sort
that,
of,
like, everybody finds these surrogate, parents. All the orphans find their surrogate parents is such an interesting, choice to make. Because, like, on some level, it's also about being like, yes, well, when I write my father's world, there are good fathers in it.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think that was at least an unconscious choice and possibly a conscious one.
It's in the text. Doesn't matter whether he meant it to be there.
Yeah. But it does not shy away from the fact that those good fathers don't matter.
They don't. I mean, Lake still dies.
Lake still dies.
Yes.
Lake still dies.
Karla still destroys his surrogate father.
That's right. Yeah, Karla destroys his father. Actually, that's really interesting that, Karla destroys his father when, the thing that destroys Karla eventually is his daughter.
Well,
like,
I mean, that sets that up nicely, doesn't it?
It does, exactly. So that was actually a really good choice. Yes. Yes. No, that's actually that was a really good choice. And he nailed Karla. Like, he understands that Karla needs to be a mystery. He says so even in the introduction. And I feel like, he nailed Karla, and he gets Smiley pretty well when seen through Susanna's eyes.
he definitely catches the sort of the Smiley who is looked upon as something of a god in his field.
Yes, and the surprise of the contrast between that and his physical appearance and behavior.
Yes, more than perhaps the Smiley interiority that we get in the later books, which is this sort of fun mix of irony and despair. But I think that's a really interesting sort of take on it, because as opposed to the sort of the family curse of fame slamming downwards, we have here at least from where we're sitting, we can piece together this partially fictive and partially real movement toward people being better parents than their parents were, and plotting little points on that graph. And I think maybe it's the sort of the emotional tonality of one book opposed to the other is like, maybe where you feel the most comfortable is where you feel in terms of your own parental trauma.
Yeah. I mean, like, I will say, as someone who had a really, really good relationship with their father, but did not go into the field that their father was in, like, my dad died a couple years ago, and I miss him all the time, and we were super, super close, but he was a musician, and I am, when I'm being an artist, a writer. So we were never... The questions of legacy are very different. And I think, therefore, I have a certain generosity towards this that I might not had I had a more fraught successor relationship with my parents.
This is the parent skeptical podcast, I'm afraid.
Fair enough.
But we value all perspectives.
We do. It's but it's I think that might in fact be part of why Isaac and I do prefer the specific flavor of bleakness of the original Le Carré.
Oh, I love that too. Like, don't get me wrong, but I think I enjoyed this more than you guys did.
Yes.
Yes, which is not to say that I didn't have some fun, over the course of this.
Yeah, I know, at a craft level, I thought it was good enough that I will actually probably at some point check out his non-writing in his dad's universe books.
They're good.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't doubt it, yeah, based on this. Well, we talked about dads and we talked about spies, and if neurodivergence makes you better at lies. We talked about women and whether they're gay. We even got to our Hungarian ancestry. And on this book that a good son wrote, we got through all our notes, Dad. There were no minor notes. Fantastic. Then I think that we can probably draw this one to a close.
All right.
Thank you so much for coming on and for exposing me to all of this for a start.
Oh yeah, welcome to a probably multi-decade obsession with really, really horrible people running around Europe.
Yes.
Yes, much like Europe itself. And yeah, no, I've nothing to say besides be with us next time for more Wizards versus Lesbians. Probably with more lesbians next time.
Less metaphorical, more actual lesbians.
Less metaphorical, exactly.
But we do have Connie, so this one technically does have wizards and lesbians, and they do argue at least.
Yes, this is absolutely true. All right. So long, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.